Alright, so I got that. I'm going to finish that piece anyway. And that was gonna be I don't know, there's something back there. It's best to just leave it that way, because I was just gonna end up on in there. Ay, ay, ay. There you go. Then over here, you got that part that does have that, right? Does do that. Some of these drawings I haven't finished them, so I figure let me get them. And being that I'm working with this medium gouache, well, I'm not working. I mean, I've been working with gouache before, but this is a different brand, and I'm pretty impressed because it's not kicking up. It's not too bad. Not too bad. Just stay with this one. Oh Lord. Well, it's better than what it was. I mean, to leave a watercolor that's all messed up, just I can work on that. Now the drawing was really bad, but I'm fixing things with the paint. Let me switch to what's this? 30 minutes. What the hell is this? I don't know. What's this? Let me get out of here. Funny times, funny times. Oh, unwind, oh, unwind. Alright, so, alright, then I gotta do the cow back there, adjust the face. What's this? Let me see if I can find something to watch. On YouTube, notice this man opens emergency exit of moving plane. Oh shit, this man is crazy. Why would he do that? Is this man, how about if he would have done that? Oh my god. Holy shit, this man is nuts. Gotta be nuts.
and then slid down the wing and onto the airfield, all while United Flight 2478 was approaching the gate. So the plane is in motion, other passengers taking a cell phone video of that broken exit door or exit window. Charges against the suspect are pending. But this was a flight from San Diego, and as the plane apparently was approaching the gate, somebody busted through that exit door and slid off the wing and onto the airfield.
Why?
Bizarre. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to click on the red subscribe button below so you can get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased.
Maybe he got people that can't be in small spaces. I don't know. That's weird. And then what's this stolen logo thanks to bomb found drug trafficking? Oh, there goes this dumb bar again. And then are they still looking sharp? And are they still looking for that guy in the bureau? You will never own a house in Canada. What the hell does that mean?
As someone who lived in a van for 4 years and now lives in an RV with my pregnant girlfriend, I would absolutely love to be a first-time homebuyer. I've been working on my credit, I've been saving, I've been doing everything I can. I got a family started, things are great, okay? Now this is a nice RV and stuff, but I would love to be in a house. I would absolutely love it, but I can't afford it. There's nowhere that I can afford the place that I want for my family. I can't, you can't get a house here. You can't. They got a stupid stress test, like they test your income against a 5.5% stress test, which is, mortgage rates aren't even, or percentages aren't even that high, and it's just ridiculous. Now, I've contributed to my RSP, I have money put away to then, when I'm ready to actually buy a house, when prices, fix themselves a little bit, to pull out under the first time home buyers program. But there's still so many things that are wrong with the Canadian housing market. Fix the stress test. Stop forcing people to hedge their income against an unreasonable percentage. It doesn't make any sense.
Riverbend. In the last 3 years, Mr. Speaker, this government's first-time homebuyers program has only approved 13,000 applications.
Wow.
The Shared Equity Mortgage Program, 9 applications. The Housing Co-Investment Fund has been so poorly executed, organizations have stopped applying altogether. But not to worry, Mr. Speaker. This minister and this prime minister have repeatedly said they are doubling down on their failed programs. So why should Canadians believe that they should ever be able to afford a home under this prime minister?
Here.
Speaker, housing prices are a real concern, especially for middle-class Canadians hoping to afford their first homes. That's why, since we brought in 2017's National Housing Strategy, we've seen millions of families move into new homes supported by government programs. And through Budget 2022, we're making further investments to double housing construction this decade, help Canadians buy their first home, curb unfair practices that drive up the price of housing, and support the construction of affordable housing. We recognize, Mr. Speaker, there is still more to do, and we will continue to do it. That's what Canadians expect of us.
The honourable member for...
No applause! No applause! None! Not one single person clapped. Not his own cabinet. Nothing. Wow, that's unbelievable.
Kenora.
Well, Mr.
Well, this guy's been such a piece of shit. Oh my god. Oh Lord Jesus, why can't things can just be where people can afford to buy a home and FBI agencies? Let me see, they're still looking for this guy.
5 days ago, this started out as a search in a small Alabama town, and now it is nationwide. Police in Alabama and elsewhere, including the FBI, are now looking for a dangerous inmate, also a suspected murderer who faces the death penalty, and the jail officer, the official in charge of him, also wanted in helping him escape. So Casey White is the inmate. Vicky White is the officer. They're not related. They have been on the run since Friday morning, and they got kind of a 6-hour head start before anybody even noticed they were gone. They're considered armed and dangerous. They have a high-powered weapon. They have a shotgun. Now surveillance video has come out revealing the moments that they left those prison walls. We have now learned that the two had a special relationship for at least 2 years, right under the noses of the entire department. So there was Vicky. She goes in, out comes Casey in handcuffs and shackles. Notice that she's got her back to him, casually walking to the patrol car. He moseys on out, gets in the car. They were supposed to go to a mental health evaluation that was not ever scheduled, and of course they don't arrive. Earlier tonight, I spoke with the sheriff who is running this investigation. This is his department, and here's what he told me.
He would get favors from her specifically that other inmates didn't get. An extra biscuit on his plate for breakfast. That sounds like a small thing. Things like that, little things that would mean nothing and be insignificant on the outside, but are major issues sometimes on the inside.
Maybe more than just a biscuit tonight. So joining us for more, retired FBI Special Agent Bobby Chacon. It seems like something right out of a movie, right? Like this doesn't happen.
She's like probably more than a biscuit tonight.
on Netflix in about a year.
Well, and it also, Bobby, it could end really, really badly because this is a dangerous felon. He faces the death penalty, has absolutely nothing to lose, and he's on the run. So first of all, they had a lot of time to plan this. If they've been in a relationship for 2 years, he's been behind bars. He's thought of nothing else but his escape. So they could have had not just a getaway plan, but a getaway place that they're hiding out, and they were prepared to do this.
Yeah.
That's a great point, Marnie, because physically they are somewhat easy to spot. I mean, this guy is 6'9", 300 plus
they're gonna
pounds.
have to
He's
sit
a
for a while.
behemoth. He's a monster. He's the kind of person that if you were sitting in a restaurant, even a fast food restaurant, somebody that big walked in, you'd do a double take, you'd see him. She's much, much smaller, so to see them together would be a very obvious thing. So I think you're right on that, in that they may be holed up somewhere simply because people are going to notice somebody that big, and particularly if they're with somebody much, much smaller like that. So I think that's a great point. I think that the reports are that she recently sold her house for much below market value, which probably means she got an all-cash deal, and that could be funding this getaway plan.
Yep, she announced that she was retiring. She sold her house. She bought a car the day before the two of them took off. She also recently lost her husband, so she was going through a tough time to a health issue. Vicky's safety obviously is important tonight, Bobby, whether she went willingly or not. She's disposable to this criminal who is capable of terrible, terrible things, and no use to him once he's out, right?
The minute she outlasts her functionality to him, her utility to him, she's gone. The minute he sees her as a possible liability, she's gone. And one of the people he was formerly in a relationship with actually came out and made a public statement to that effect, pleading with her, saying, look, the minute he doesn't see you as a benefit to him anymore, you're gone. Your life is worthless to him. This is a guy that doesn't value human life. He's got a hugely violent criminal history. He's the worst case scenario for a fugitive hunt because, like you said earlier, he may not be taken alive. He may have that attitude, and I pray for the officers and the marshals who are tracking him down. I urge the public, if they see them, do not engage, do not try to take their picture.
Oh yeah, they're
Call
gonna.
the marshals.
They're gonna.
The U.S. Marshals are on this. They have an app, a tip app that you can download. You go to the Marshals app and report any type of scene, but do not approach them, do not take their picture, do not follow them, because this guy is extremely dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Bobby, and at some point he's going to come up for air, and you don't want to be caught in the crosshairs of that. A quote from his ex-girlfriend, by the way, who really has just been shouting from the rooftop in the last 24 hours how dangerous this guy is. She says, if, and she's talking about Vicky here, if she is still alive, she needs to get the hell out. Run as far as you can, and turn yourself in and contact somebody. Do the right thing before you lose your life or somebody else does. So how do they go about, the marshals and this local department, which clearly this has gotten so big that they're going to need help finding him. How do they go about tracking him down? I mean, cell phones, digital evidence, the clues over the last 2 years trying to figure out what this plan was. How soon before you think they
sit for a
surface?
long time.
Well, it'll depend on, with a fugitive, the main thing is how much funds they have to keep themselves squirreled away before they have to, because the only reason they pop up, and you remember Eric Rudolph was a fugitive in the North Carolina woods after the Centennial Park bombing for 2 years, and he only popped up because he ran out of food, and he ran out of places to break into, these cabins where he was getting food. So it will depend on how much cash they have that will depend, that will serve as, you know, they will only pop up if they have to. So right now, whatever their plan was, I'm sure the marshals are scouring their records, their communications, their social media, whatever it is, to find out where they planned on going, because it's really difficult to have a plan to go to a place without ever having searched it on the internet or been there on vacation or something. You can't pick a place on a map and just go there without some kind of pre-staged intelligence about that place and how you went about getting that. And so I'm sure they're scouring their backgrounds, particularly her background, to see if she got brochures for any place, if she looked into something on her home computer, anything like that. That's what they're looking at to go, because, like I said, it's almost impossible just to throw a dart at a map and say that's where we're going to go when you don't know anything about that place.
Right, you're trying to follow the breadcrumbs. Bobby, real quick before we let you go, I mean, people do crazy things for love, but this is, I mean, this has to be, she had an exemplary record. She'd worked for the department for 16 years. She was announcing her retirement, not a blemish in her career, and then this. So some form of manipulation is speculative at this point, but I mean, what would provoke her to do this, to form this relationship with him? And I mean, what's happening behind prison walls that most of us don't know? Guards and inmates and manipulation potentially in this case.
Yeah, well, you know, I was talking to colleagues about this today, and we're befuddled about what motivated her to do this. But as you said, she was in an emotionally vulnerable state. She lost her husband recently. That could play into it. But these guards and inmates do kind of bond because they're together all day, every day. They probably spend more time with these inmates than they do with their own families. So they have to really be on guard, and the system has to be set up to determine whether or not this is happening, whether inappropriate relationships are happening, and to stop it before it gets to this point.
Well, the manhunt continues tonight, and let's hope they're closing in on them, and we have news to report on it soon. Retired FBI Special Agent Bobby Chacon, good to have you on tonight. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.
Oh, there was an FBI agent, or ex-FBI.
After being accused of spreading Russian disinformation, Hunter Biden's laptop repairman is suing the head of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, as well as CNN, Politico, and the Daily Beast, all for defamation. Joining me now is that repairman, John Isaac, along with his attorney, Brian De La Roca, and Joe Flynn, the CEO of the America Project, the organization that is sponsoring the lawsuit. Good morning to you all. It's great to have you on. John Paul, we know that your life has been turned absolutely upside down because you were accused of spreading Russian disinformation. Tell us about the last few years and what led you to file this lawsuit.
Good morning, Carly. Thanks for having me on the show. Well, the last couple of years have been pretty tough. You know, it was pretty quick out of the gate that I was labeled a hacker. And then after Adam Schiff and 51 intelligence experts decided to pen a letter and tell the rest of the American people I was a Russian asset, things have kind of gone downhill from there.
Yeah, and I understand you lost your business because you were accused of being a Russian agent, and your community turned against you. Is that right?
Yeah, things got heated. I had to enlist the support from Wilmington Police Department to kind of make sure nothing bad happened to me while I was at the shop. And after a couple weeks, it eventually got so bad that I had to close my business and flee the state.
Wow. You know, John Paul, you had the laptop in your possession for a while, and I know you spent some time looking through it. President Biden says that he has never had any discussions with his son about his son's overseas business dealings. From what you saw on that laptop, is that true?
No, I don't think he was being sincere when he said that.
And what's the thing in the laptop that stood out to you the most?
Well, for me, it was national security concerns. There was a lot of things that I saw on the laptop that should not have been sent in the open, especially White House information pertaining to the Ukraine being sent to private Ukrainian citizens to benefit their business. And the national security ramifications from that alone I felt fear for the nation. I felt fear for myself personally because of a lot of personal incriminating evidence I had seen on the laptop. I feared retaliation, and an effort was going to be put in place to silence me.
And that's why you gave it to the FBI and also a copy to Rudy Giuliani. So now the American people know what's in the laptop as well. Brian, tell us about this case specifically against Adam Schiff, CNN, The Daily Beast, and Politico. Why them?
Well, they were really the main ones
Give a
who
copy to
perpetuated
Giuliani that
the
way.
lies.
Because if he
This
gives it
is-
to the
this case is
FBI, he
about the
doesn't know if they're gonna do the
of
right
these
thing, you know?
organizations and
That was
people
smart.
to really
That was
knowingly lie about John Paul to the American public,
Very smart.
create this image about John Paul that he is in some way sided with the Russians. And it was all their desperate attempt to ensure that President Trump didn't get reelected. But the problem with that is John Paul was one of the main victims of that attempt. So it really is about making them see what they did and seeing if we can get John Paul some justice.
Well, Joe, you're the CEO of the America Project. You're an organization that's sponsoring the lawsuit. Tell us about the organization and why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, the America Project is building the largest network of grassroots organizations and individuals to support freedom and the rights of the individual. And we saw this case in particular as an egregious example of how government officials and the media collude to create a false narrative and to destroy a person's life. And for me in particular, as General Flynn's brother, this hit home for me because this is exactly what they did to my brother. So I reached out to Brian, who I've known for a number of years, and said, Brian, this is something we'd like to get behind. This fits exactly in our mission of supporting freedom and supporting individual rights. And we're just very happy to be part of this because we want to see justice for John Paul.
Retired General Michael Flynn, so we thank your family for its service. Really quickly, John Paul, because we're running out of time, I know you do have a Give, Send, Go account. What's that information in case people want to donate? We know you've been through so much.
It can be found, it's called Build Back Mac Isaac, and my friend Kristen set it up for me, and I have been just overwhelmed with the support that I've received so far, and I know if it hasn't been for that support, I wouldn't be here.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Not from the American people
Absolutely.
or from...
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We so appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Steve Ducey. I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
Let me see. We'll do it.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson's Tonight. Here's a happy memory. By breakfast, really even brunch, on Election Day 2016, virtually nobody in Washington, D.C. thought Donald Trump could win. And they didn't think that because the entire press corps had been telling them for months that Trump had, as they always put it, literally no chance, not even as an abstract theoretical matter. This wasn't actually a race. In fact, come November 8th, you'll remember this, Donald Trump was going to be drowned by a towering blue tsunami and swept away forever, along with the rest of the Republican Party, the collaborators anyway. And polling numbers seemed to confirm that this was going to happen. And so, by the way, did the private betting markets. At least one of those markets had set the spread at 80-20 for Hillary Clinton that morning. In the end, of course, they were not only wrong, they were hilariously wrong. By midnight, Trump had won. And a lot of highly educated, extremely well-credentialed people suddenly looked ridiculous.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton herself was so shocked by the results that night that she refused to give a concession speech. She went to bed hoping it was just a dream. And you probably remember all of that very well, but it was what happened next in the days between the election and Thanksgiving that it turns out in a lot of ways was much more important. What happened during that period set the course for where we are right now. Where we are right now is speeding toward one of the great disasters in our history. So the leaders of the Democratic Party couldn't, in effect, handle the outcome of the 2016 election. They snapped under the strain of it, under the crushed expectations. But rather than look inward and assess their own role in the disaster, what did we do wrong? Why did voters reject us? And other questions that emotionally mature adults might have asked. Democratic leaders instead immediately set out to find somebody else to blame for the election results. And soon they settled on Russia. Vladimir Putin got Donald Trump elected, they told us. Hillary Clinton said that repeatedly. Now, at first, it was hard to take any of it very seriously. We tried, but there was no evidence it was true at all. And so a rational person concluded the obvious. This was a childish psychological defense mechanism. It was not a factual claim. And yet they kept saying it in the face of no evidence. And over time, they began acting on it like it was true. And then even over more time, they paralyzed the entire federal government for years, fruitlessly trying to prove the core claims of Russiagate. But they never could, because those claims weren't true. And yet, critically, they clung to those claims. They never stopped repeating the talking point. The Russian government, quote, hacked our election. That was Jen Psaki not long ago saying it out loud like it were true. Now, here's the context. As she said that, Psaki was trying to explain why the Biden administration is, in effect, working to overthrow the Russian government right now. And for once, Jen Psaki was telling the truth. That is why. Democrats have convinced themselves that Russia stole the presidency which rightfully belonged to Hillary Clinton. And they mean it when they say it. And that's why they are taking us to war with Russia. Now, there are a lot of things going on here, a lot of threads, as in any big story, but on some level, the core motivation is just that simple. Here's what we know it's not. We know the war in Ukraine is not about saving democracy, please. We know it's not about protecting the sacred borders of a sovereign country. We know the Biden administration doesn't care about those principles because they run our country, and we see how they act. And we know for dead certain, and this comes
Protecting
as
the
sad news
borders
to a lot
over
of
there.
Americans who are
He
pro-action.
doesn't even
But we
protect
know
our
now that the
own.
war in Ukraine is certainly not about helping the Ukrainian people, those poor people.
Are you
Many
kidding
more
me?
Ukrainian civilians
Oh,
will
Lord.
die,
What a
certainly,
joke, huh?
thanks to the Biden administration's policy.
What a
If you wanted to
joke.
save Ukraine, its people, its infrastructure, its nation, you would push for a settlement now. You would have done it 2 months ago, but they're not doing that. They projected it out of hand. So that's not their goal, saving Ukraine.
It's a
Saving
little
Ukraine,
bit,
no, that's not their goal. Instead, the war in Ukraine is designed to cause regime change in Moscow. They want to topple the Russian government. That would be payback for the 2016 election. So this is the logical, maybe the inevitable end stage of Russiagate. And we should have seen this coming because they said it out loud years ago. Here's Adam Schiff from 2 years ago predicting it, saying it. Watch this.
As one witness put it during our impeachment inquiry, aid Ukraine and her people so that we can fight Russia over there and we don't have to fight Russia here.
So we arm Ukraine so we can fight Russia. Now, how many Americans, whatever you think of Putin, probably not much, justifiably, probably don't have a lot of interest in moving to Russia. But how many Americans then or now want to, quote, fight Russia? A very small group. But Adam Schiff said it out loud at the time in the House of Representatives. We don't arm Ukraine so we can help the Ukrainians. They're merely unfortunate pawns in all of this. We arm Ukraine so that we can punish Russia. Why? For stealing Hillary Clinton's coronation. If only we had taken Adam Schiff seriously as he said it again and again and again. But now we can't help but take Adam Schiff seriously because he's one of the prime movers of this war. Adam Schiff spent this weekend in Eastern Europe checking on the progress of the war he has done so much to bring about. He traveled there with Nancy Pelosi and a number of other of the most conspiracy-minded Democrats in Congress. These are the Russiagate true believers seeing their theory come to fruition. That's what this is. Here's the group, Pelosi, Schiff, and the rest, meeting with the president of Ukraine.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming. I'm Jim McGovern from Massachusetts. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much. You're very welcome.
So how did Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi wind up in charge of America's foreign policy as we stand on the cusp of a third world war?
Can you believe this?
And why are Republicans supporting them? And what happens when you put people with a demonstrated lack of boundaries or self-control or wisdom
And why
in
are
charge
they
of
over there?
something
Why
as
are
important as the fate of nations?
conservatives over there to support us?
Watch as one after the other, the Democrats you just saw on tape announce that this regime change is not nearly over. In fact, this war has just begun.
Uh-oh.
Well, one thing is really clear, is that this delegation will understand
Oh,
President Biden is
They're
being
gonna
very
have to
clear
know
with his
them.
most recent aid package request.
They're gonna get no.
It is a historic request that we're going to push hard in the United States Congress to help pass.
They're gonna get us
It
killed.
sends a very simple message.
These people
We
are
are
gonna
not
get us
interested in
killed.
stalemates. We are
They're gonna
not
get us
interested in
killed.
going back
They're
to
gonna
the
get us
status
killed.
quo. The United States of America is in this to win. And we will stand with Ukraine until
I
victory
gotta
is
prepare
won.
Fanny,
That was Congressman Jason
run to
Crow,
the freaking
a
sewers.
confirmed buffoon, telling us that we're not in it to achieve a stalemate. We're? Really? Some of us were under the impression, based on their public statements, that we were defending the sovereignty of another country, Ukraine. It's not up to us, it's up to the voters of Ukraine. Ukraine's a democracy. But here's Congressman Crow telling us we're not going to accept a, quote, stalemate. We're in it to win it. We're going to win. We're here till we get victory. Well, that raises the obvious question, what is winning? What is victory? How do we know when we've won? Well, Jason Crow didn't tell us. And neither, by the way, did Nancy Pelosi. She just said we're going to keep sending weapons to Ukraine, quote, until the fight is done.
We believe that we are visiting you to say thank you for your fight for freedom, that we are on a frontier of freedom, and that your fight is a fight for everyone. And so our commitment is to be there for you until the fight is done.
How do you get here exactly? Do you feel betrayed? If you're one of the millions of good-hearted Americans who put a Ukrainian flag pin on your lapel or put one in front of your house expressing solidarity with the poor oppressed people of Ukraine, you probably didn't think you were signing up for this. Nancy Pelosi telling us we're in a war with a nuclear-armed power with no clear end date. Seen that movie before? Oh, we just finished one after 20 years in Afghanistan. Will it look like that? This is an open-ended conflict, said Nancy Pelosi, just like the war on terror. And just in case you missed it, they all repeated that line. Here's your nightmare again. Adam Schiff in charge of the war against Russia. Watch.
Why did these people, why did the president even approve this?
And we are determined to do everything in our power to make this so. We are proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, and we will until victory is won.
These people are playing dress up. They have no idea what they're talking about, and they don't care. They get to pretend to be statesmen for a day. But when Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi, again, people with a demonstrated years-long record of being willing to say anything for personal power, anything to improve the fortunes of their political party, when they're standing up with a foreign head of state saying, here's an open check, you fill in the number, you gotta wonder where this is going. We know where it could go. This is the most reckless foreign policy in our lifetime, in American history. You are watching a group of decadent, in some cases senile leaders, casually dismiss the consequences of going to war with a nuclear-armed nation. Dismiss the consequences of nuclear war. Like it's not even worth thinking about. But it is worth thinking about. They tell us daily Vladimir Putin is evil and insane, and that may well be true. But this same man has threatened to use nuclear weapons against the United States and Western Europe if this continues. And why don't we believe him? You may have missed this. The New York Times didn't seem to have time to cover it. But here's Russia's foreign minister just last week underscoring the point.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov with a chilling warning. The risk of nuclear war is a real one. Speaking to state-run media, Lavrov said, quote, the danger is serious. It is real. It cannot be underestimated. He added that he did not want to see these risks of nuclear war, quote, artificially inflated.
He does not see it as an artificially inflated risk, says Lavrov. So what they're saying is, we will use nuclear weapons against you and your allies if you don't back off. If, for example, this seems existential, like you're trying to overthrow our government. It's hardly a defense of Russia to say that's a real possibility, and has been for quite some time. So it was 2 years ago that Vladimir Putin revised Russia's nuclear deterrent policy. Now, the new policy allows Russia to use nuclear weapons in response to a conventional strike. That means some sort of non-nuclear provocation. Now, in March, Russia's former president, Dmitry Medvedev, who sits on Russia's Security Council, reminded our country of this policy. He warned Joe Biden that Russia would indeed use nuclear weapons against the West in response to any, quote, act of aggression that is committed against Russia and its allies. Now, what would that look like? Would it include helping to shoot down a Russian transport plane carrying hundreds of Russian troops? The Pentagon has admitted doing that. You know, have to be for Russia to see that as a pretty reckless act and not just doing it but then bragging about it to NBC News? Where does that get us? We should find out. We do know that Putin has placed Russia's nuclear forces on high alert. And again, Russia has the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. And
I don't like the way this is coming out.
Use those weapons? They tell us daily he is evil and insane, and he may well be. A risk? Yeah. But no one in Washington seems worried in the slightest. In fact, Congressman Adam
I don't like the way this came out, but we're gonna do right. It's compared to the way it was.
Legal justification that got us into Iraq for an point. He wants an authorization to use military force. Watch.
Senator Kane was with us, and he said it is too soon to begin talking about potential use of force in Ukraine. Do you think he's right?
No, I don't. I don't think we need to be using force in Ukraine right now. I just introduced an AUMF, authorization for the use of military force, giving the president basically congressional leverage or permission to use it if WMDs, nuclear, biological, or chemical, are used in Ukraine. It doesn't compel the president to do it. It just says if it is used, he has that leverage. There may be a point that we have to recognize, you know, look, this is, at prior to World War II, there were moments nobody ever wanted to get involved and eventually came to realize they had to. I hope we don't get to that point here. But
Yeah, we don't have to either right now. Just let them handle,
So last year, Adam Kinzinger was a guy who'd been redistricted out of his own district and was struggling for some kind of cable news contributor.
Let NATO handle that.
For Adam Kinzinger. Now, Adam Kinzinger is on the Sunday shows every weekend doing his Winston Churchill.
Not even
So you can see there's a built-in incentive for mediocre and intellectually limited members of Congress to play the war hawk. But you have to ask yourself, why all of a sudden is everybody talking about chemical and biological weapons? It was just a couple of weeks ago that Joe Biden,
Alright, I don't like the way that came out, but compared to before,
the potential use of chemical weapons by Russia. The United States would use its
better
chemical weapons against the Russians if they used theirs against the Ukrainians. And then, because you're not supposed to admit that you have chemical weapons, Joe Biden's national security advisor, whose memory still works, walked it back and told us, oh no, the president misspoke, just like he did when he told us this was a regime change. We would never use chemical weapons. But for some reason, a lot of people in Washington, in both parties, are still talking a lot about the U.S. using chemical weapons in Russia. Here's one of the most limited members of Congress, Michael McCall, Republican from Texas, widely regarded as a mouthpiece for the intel agencies. Listen to what he says.
What would happen if a chemical weapon was dropped in Ukraine and or a short-range tactical nuke? The question there is, would the world idly sit back and watch that happen without doing anything?
What should we do?
I just find it hard to believe, and when I talk to the Secretary General of NATO, their job is really to defend NATO, not trigger Article 5. But in my judgment, that's beyond the pale. That crosses a red line. And I think if that happens, we would have to respond in kind.
So stories like this give people like Michael McCall a chance to give you a moral lecture on television, which is the whole appeal. But again, all of a sudden you have sitting members of Congress with access to high-level intelligence talking casually about using chemical weapons or nuclear weapons against a nuclear-armed state. So it's not a defense of Russia. You don't have to believe Russia was justified in invading Ukraine. They weren't. It's not a defense of Putin to think to yourself, hold on a second here. How did we get here? Talking about nuclear war on the Sunday show. Should we be? Are we ready for that? It's clear no one in the Biden administration cares or is worried about it at all. The escalation continues at a remarkable pace, and you know that if you watch the money. We're continuing to shovel cash to the government of Ukraine, which just last year, Democrats described as one of the most corrupt in the world, but whatever. And we're sending money to Ukraine at levels that are astounding. Joe Biden signed off on a funding package in March for $13.6 billion in aid for Ukraine. Then he sent an additional $1.3 billion in late April. Then he sent $350 million in February. He also sent $800 million in March. In addition to all of that, Joe Biden has requested another $33 billion for Ukraine. And that request includes funding for, quote, longer-range artillery of a heavier caliber than the howitzers we've already been sending. In other words, we're sending artillery to Ukraine that could easily strike Russian territory, and we're sending $33 billion to do it. Now, how much is $33 billion? In a moment when Congress is writing checks for trillions. Well, to put it into context, $33 billion is more than double what the Biden administration spends protecting our national borders. And that's just one check to Ukraine, but it's double the annual budget to protect our borders. The Biden administration, in fact, it's more than double, just requested $15 billion for the entire budget for U.S. Customs and Border Protection. And just $8 billion for
Things
U.S.
just seem
Immigration
to
and
get
Customs.
worse and worse and worse.
So, we're spending twice on their borders what we spend on our
Worse
own
and
in one
worse
request,
and worse.
in 1 week. How much is $33 billion? Well, it's more than we spend on Veterans Affairs every month, taking care of our own veterans. And the saddest point of all this is, it hasn't caused the Russians to withdraw from Ukraine, and no one's claiming that it will. It hasn't bankrupted Putin, it hasn't crippled the Russian economy, it certainly hurt our economy. What's going on here? Well, the Daily Mail is reporting that a Russian oligarch with close ties to Vladimir Putin, he's on the bad guy list, right? No. Because he met with the president's son in Moscow several times to discuss investment deals. So that oligarch, strangely, is being sanctioned by the UK, but not by the Biden administration. The Biden administration, for all its bellicose talk about Russia, has decided not to sanction the one oligarch who's friends with the president's son. Just to restate,
What a joke.
this has nothing to do with Ukraine. The war in Ukraine does not have anything to do with Ukraine, the long-term fortunes of the country, or the health and safety of its people. It has to do with a lot of other things. The Biden administration's request, for example, for Ukraine aid,
Yeah, because if he does
didn't see this
that,
coming, includes a pathway
I
to
could imagine
citizenship
he
for
probably
Afghan
has something
refugees,
on Biden's son.
their spouses and children. Quote, the Secretary of Homeland Security, in the Secretary's discretion, may adjust the status of an Afghan national to that of an individual lawfully admitted for permanent residence. Oh, so in an aid package meant to defend the borders of another sovereign nation, we continue to degrade our own. Bet you didn't think defending Ukrainian democracy meant admitting tens of thousands of more foreign nationals into this country overnight. If you want to know why our leaders are determined to escalate this conflict,
Oh well,
there's
what are you
your
gonna do,
answer. It
right?
means more power for them. It means revenge for the 2016 election. And if that means triggering a nuclear conflict between our nation and theirs, so be it. Subscribe to the Fox News YouTube channel to catch our nightly opens. Stories that are changing the world and changing your life.
I like the way
Tucker Carlson's
fix that.
Welcome to Hannity, and tonight comedian Dave Chappelle under attack. A deranged amateur rapper now charged with assault with a deadly weapon after storming the stage with a gun-shaped knife and lunging at the comedian during a stand-up routine. Now, of course, the incredibly smart and stable ladies of the View, they knew exactly who to blame. What do you think? Donald Trump?
What do you think is happening? I mean, it's happening on airplanes. It's happening on street corners. People are just running. I mean, the Hollywood bubble.
What's
Just
happening?
ran up on gangs that could contribute to what's going on. The pandemic, the opioid crisis, the fact that Trump was out there saying things like, just knock the hell out of them. I promise you I'll pay for the legal fees when we have an airline. A political thing. Come on, I know you want to wrap it all into politics, but this is really about security. Like, I don't understand. This happened before.
It's so stupid. They don't know what the hell's going on. Get out of here. You're freaking lost. This building's so freaking lost. Lost. I don't know what a crazy world we live in. Everybody's fighting.
Welcome to Crime Circus, ladies and
Now
gentlemen.
we're talking
My name's
about
Kurt Buck,
nuclear
and I'll be your
bombs.
host as always.
What else?
Now let's get right into this.
The watercolor came out bad, but I mean compared to how it was before, because before it was really bad. Really bad.
Okay? You need anything, any water or anything?
Well, I'll be fine.
In just a minute, okay?
Anything else just not gonna go, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Hello, hi.
You want to say so, that's my partner, Michelle.
Hello.
What's the highest level of education you have? Didn't quite complete 10th grade. Found out about halfway through.
This part of the video has been redacted by law enforcement. It's a good time to like this video, comment, and support Crime Circus.
Alright, so this, I mean, compared to how it was, this thing, because it was really bad.
You were getting sure.
No problem. Anybody say any
Now
questions
it's-
asked?
I understood.
This is the same type of form we would use for any type of investigation we're doing. Just want to make sure you understand everything. If you have questions, ask.
No, that's fine.
Okay. All right, if you agree to allow us to do that, if you will sign out there. And we'll have your husband sign one also, as your husband.
What did they charge for?
Does anybody else live there with you guys?
Just, maybe my husband.
Okay. How long you guys live there?
Yes, is, 2, maybe 3 years.
Where'd you guys live before that, in town, or?
No, live in Orange Park.
How long you guys been married?
That's a good question.
Long time?
Too long.
Too long. Let's take it that. Y'all from Northeast Florida and from Orange Park, or?
No, I'm originally from, northern Indiana, up around Terre Haute, Indianapolis, and he's from here.
Okay, is that how you ended up here with your town?
So, well, my kids was here,
Okay.
and I moved down here because they wanted me to be down here with them.
Okay, how many kids do you have?
What's that, two?
So you need grandkids?
Yes,
How many?
4?
Four. Do you babysit any other kids, or just?
No, just Cooper.
Cooper? And how do you know Cooper? How do you know his parents?
I know his dad is, his brother was married to my daughter. That's how I got to know
Okay.
Carly.
Okay, so Cooper's dad's brother was married to him.
Yeah.
Okay. How long have you been babysitting Cooper?
Around that.
About a month. Did you know him before then? What hours do you want to babysit?
It depends whatever he brings. Sometimes it's 7:30. Sometimes it's 7:40. Sometimes it's 8 o'clock. Just depends on when he gets in earlier to me.
Okay, so somewhere between 7 and 8 o'clock,
Yeah.
that range. How long does he usually stay until you pick up home?
Depends on what they're doing, the type of work. Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 5. Just depends.
And does your husband work, or?
No,
He doesn't work?
he's on disability.
Okay. Is he home most days, or?
Biggest part of the time, yes,
Okay. Did you babysit? Today is Tuesday, right? It is Tuesday. Did you babysit yesterday?
Yes.
All day?
No,
How long did you babysit
he's,
yesterday?
from 7:30. I think he come down at 3:30.
3:30. Was he, how was he at you yesterday?
It was fussy, had a fever, it was congested. And I put some warm clothes on him because he was cold.
Yeah. How long has he been sick?
Really can't tell you.
Was it the first time you noticed he's sick? Was yesterday, or
No, they told me he was sick
when did they take it out?
last week.
Did you babysit him last week also?
Yeah,
Did you see him sick last week, or?
he was sick when they brought him to me. He said he was congested, sneezing, pulling on his ears.
What,
And he's teething, so he does a lot of crying.
free crime, baby?
He cries a lot because his gums hurting.
Yeah. When did, what all days did you babysit last week?
Let's see, they took a couple of days off last week because he was really sick. They wanted to stay home because his temperature was up.
Yeah.
They wanted to keep an eye on him all day.
Yeah.
And he was still sick when he came back the next day.
What days was that, you remember?
Last week, they brought him back Thursday because I had a doctor's appointment Friday.
He was getting out Friday. So he was sick at least on Thursday, and when did you first notice he was sick last week?
I knew something was wrong with him because he was kind of sneezing, nose was running, and crying all the time. I thought maybe this was his teeth.
Yeah.
The babies do get sick with
Yeah, yeah.
teething.
Yeah. Yeah. Yesterday, you said he was sick yesterday too. How sick was he?
He was pretty sick.
Did you check his temperature yesterday?
Yeah, his temperature was 99.8 all day long.
You said he had congestion both nasal and chest, or
Yeah,
was it?
his nose, you can hear it down here.
Okay, you hear a little rattling in his chest. And you said, what were the hours yesterday again?
7:30 to 3,
3:30.
something around 3:30,
And what time did he come back this morning?
7:30.
About 7:30. You based it by the hour, did they by the hour, did they by week?
They pay me weekly.
Okay, just like I said.
Yeah,
Okay. How much do they pay you per week?
75 a week.
So he drops him off about 7:30 this morning. What'd you notice this morning? Just kind of take me through.
I kind of noticed there was something wrong with him. I thought maybe it was just me, you know. So I really didn't think anything about it. So later on today,
Did he eat it all today?
he ate a little bit today.
What time did you give him his first? Does he eat bottle or does he
He
eat
takes a
cereal?
bottle with cereal in it.
Okay.
Then I feed him he's the other meals.
What kind of other meals does he eat?
He's pudding, yogurt, you know, stuff like that, soft.
What time did he have the first bottle with you today?
Or to be honest, we really didn't look.
You about?
I say 9.
Yeah, and I'm about to say it. You had no stuff like that. So about 9 o'clock, he had a bottle. Did he eat normal amount or normal amount? Did he eat any pudding or anything at that time, or just a bottle of cereal?
Pudding.
How much formula? Is it formula that he has?
Yeah,
How much formula and cereal did he have?
a bottle.
A bottle. What's a bottle? Like 9 ounces, 10 ounces?
I'm not sure. I think I think they're 10, if I'm not
It's
mistaken.
almost all the way full bottle.
Yeah,
You drink all that.
pretty much all of it. And we go drink maybe 3/4 of it, take a nap, and then go back up, eat some more, and drink some more milk.
And then you said he ate some pudding or something at that time too?
Yeah,
When would he have ate it again?
when he got up from his nap.
Is that kind of normal? That's about
Yeah,
normal
yeah.
routine. He comes in, he eats a bottle about 9, takes a nap. When did he wake up from that nap? Do you remember about?
It was on one of my game shows was on Price is Right.
Price Right's on 11 o'clock?
No, sorry.
Price Right on 11.
Let's make a deal.
Let's make a deal. I don't know what time now.
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, okay.
I watched him regular.
So about 10 o'clock, so we only slept for about an hour, less than an hour?
Yeah, something like that. Sometimes a little longer.
Okay.
And you cry.
Crying all day?
Yeah, there's nothing I could do to please you to, entertain me.
Okay. So then what happens from there? As much detail as you can.
So
So
after
he has that, wakes up at 10 and what's good? He's crying.
crying, I put him in I got one of the little music rockers that rocks back and forth, plays the music. They had little buttons.
Has buttons.
He lay there for a while, cooling, talking, and, normal baby.
Yeah.
And he didn't like that, so I tried the walker. And he played there for a few minutes. And he didn't want to be in there, so I took him out, tried to feed him, give him another bottle. He didn't want that. So I checked to make sure if he was wet or could be diaper or something. Wasn't anything wrong with him. He was fine all day long.
It's where everybody's, these little congested.
Yeah. So then what happens next?
And I laid him, down again. It's about 12 maybe, something like that. He didn't want to sleep. He just cried and cried and cried. So I picked him up, held him, rocked him, tried a bottle again. Tried to feed him again. And you know what I did was push the, I just pushed the bottle out with the mouth. He just cried and cried and cried. They gave stuff for his teeth, for his gums.
What you do for that?
What kind of little tablet they got done for babies, a little white tablet.
Yeah.
That's for,
Is that something your mom gave you? Mom, dad gave you?
yeah. They always got something in there for me.
Okay. So then what happens next?
I said he wasn't gonna go to sleep, so I rocked with him. Tried all over again. He wasn't gonna do it. He acted like he was tired, he was gonna last with fear and crying. I said, well, I'll lay him down. You know what they was doing, they cried hard like that. That's what he was doing. And I started cooking. And I hear nothing, I said, well, okay, he's asleep. So I waited a few minutes, went back over and I do like this, I said, Cooper. And no response, so I took it and I shook him again. I say, I hollered again, I say, Cooper! Nothing. You know, the eyes are halfway open. I thought, he sleeps like that sometimes. But he's just sleeping. And I hollered at him again. I picked him up. He just limper. So well, maybe I picked him up wrong. So I picked him up, holding him like I always did, for my chest. Kept talking to him, kept hollering. Kept just shaking his leg, his arms, you know. And he would respond. So it scared me, so I laid him down. Looked up my next door neighbor.
Where'd you lay down
On the chair. White baby.
What kind of chair? Like a
It
recliner?
was a recliner. And I hollered at him again. Didn't respond. I said, oh my God, something's wrong. What'd I do? So I ran over to my next door neighbor. She comes flying over there. He was doing CPR. They told her to put compressions like this here on him and blowing his mouth. They told her to do this here.
Okay.
Kept doing this here.
Yeah.
Kept blowing his mouth.
She doing that or you doing that?
She was doing that. I was screaming and crying.
Yeah.
I go, what the hell happened here? What's going on? He was just fine 2-3 hours ago.
Yeah.
He's laughing, eating, playing, cooling, you know? I was like, yeah, what the hell happened here?
So did he
The
so then the rescue comes and takes him?
She had him laid down. And she turned to the side, a bunch of mucus came rolling out of his mouth, a bunch.
That's a hand
My
drink.
floor was wet.
Like throw up?
Yeah.
Where out on the floor is that?
The carpet there in the
Oh,
living room.
yeah, maybe not.
Between, I got a coffee table here, I got another recliner there, I got a TV there,
Oh,
a
shit.
couch
He
over
probably,
here.
oh, he's
I said,
flying
What
up.
furniture is it nearest?
It was near the coffee table,
Near the coffee table and what would it be? The coffee table and the
his little, chair, his little walker, sorry.
Okay, so it's gonna be between the coffee table and the
The
wall.
coffee table and the walker, and like I said, there was another chair there, recliner. But he's more closer to the,
It was enough that it might make the floor wet.
yeah,
Okay. And that was after the CPR, she turned to one side and that's
yeah,
when
and
he
then
touched.
when he came
Did
up,
he ever start breathing at all that you're aware of?
no,
Was he cold to the touch? Was he stiff?
I didn't touch him, she did.
No, when you picked him up.
He was, like I said, limp.
Real enough? Was he
He
warm
kind
at all or
of
cold? Or,
clammy.
I mean, was the color off or?
No, he was all pale.
Real pale?
Maybe it was just me when I first got down there.
Was your husband home today?
No.
What time did he
He's
leave?
got a part-time job on the side.
Okay. What time did he leave?
He left about 30.
So he was left before the baby.
He left long before the baby.
What does he work do?
Eagles, they're on Lanes Avenue, Eagles Glass. On Lanes Avenue, the glass company.
Oh, glass,
Called
okay,
Eagles.
okay, I got you, I thought you said class, okay, I got you.
Well, I got a just one.
Yeah, yeah,
Keith,
I know what, that's
they keep me, keep falling out.
Yeah.
Keep from talking right.
So, he leaves at 6:45, was anybody else there today?
It's just me and the baby and my little dog,
What kind of dog you have?
Jay. I got a, Jack Russell and a, Yorkie.
How big is it? How big is
Not
it?
Yorkie, she's not big.
Dorothy's real small, right?
She's not small, she's not big.
She's not one of the little miniature ones?
Oh, no.
She got ones?
No.
Okay. About how much do you think she weighs?
30 pounds probably.
Oh, so that's cool.
She, eats,
Yeah,
just like we do.
yeah. She an older dog or a young dog?
She don't know, she's 22 years old,
How about the Jack Russell?
but it's mixed.
Oh,
It's
well,
all
I thought you
one
said you
dog.
had 2 dogs.
No, I'm sorry,
Oh, okay,
it's
so
all
you had a Jack
one
Russell.
dog.
Oh, okay, yes,
Mixed
Jack
with
Russell. mix.
Yorkie.
Okay. Nice.
Sorry.
No, that's probably me. How is that dog? Is the dog pretty hyper or just
No, she's cool.
stay away from the baby?
I'm just gonna do her kisses every morning.
It doesn't jump
And the
on
baby,
her.
takes his little hands, touch his hair, his ears.
Did you ever jump on the baby at all?
Oh, no.
Did the baby fall today at all or anything
No.
happen? Or did it kind of injured?
No,
Okay, this is
no,
another one.
but her baby.
I'm not saying you would, but sometimes accidents happen.
You know, it do happen. I gotta watch this one arm here. Sometimes it gives out.
Yeah,
I can't feel nothing,
yeah.
but I use this hand a lot. I was touching him,
Mhm.
holding him up. If this arm don't work, I grab this one. I always got hold of him.
Yeah. But there was no accidents today?
No,
Nothing happened that would cause any injuries?
no. I was just concerned about the chest.
Well,
That's all.
yeah, and that's what we were concerned about at first too. But you went to UF Health over there on H Street
Yeah.
and they did a CAT scan. So that's what we gotta figure out how that happened.
I don't know how that happened.
And that's why I'm asking you, so any accidents today?
You know, I played where it keeps touching up in the air, you know.
She dropped you today on accident.
No.
Because now, I mean, because here's the thing, you know, obviously, you know what we do. And we're very good at what we do.
Yeah,
And
that's
those
all.
doctors are excellent at shoes. We talk about shoes, but if you're hurt real bad, it's the place to go.
No, I can agree with Chance. They do take good
If
care
you're
of
hurt
you.
real bad, that's where you need to go.
Yeah.
It's a trauma unit. You know, the doctor's there. It's a skull fracture. Skull fracture is something that, if that would have happened over the weekend or this morning before you had it, it would have been pretty obvious. Because the baby would not.
What is that?
America's newest nuclear bomb warhead has entered production. The National Nuclear Security Administration on Thursday announced that it had completed the first production unit of the B-6112, an updated version of the warhead used on weapons dropped from fighters and bombers. The U.S. Air Force is making progress toward fully certifying its F-35A stealth fighters for the nuclear strike role, armed with the new B-6112 nuclear bomb. Flight tests of the jet carrying the weapon were recently completed, involving the release of what the service described in a statement as the most representative B-6112 test asset from an operationally representative F-35A. The service has said in the past that the F-35A could start carrying the bombs operationally before the end of next year. These bombs may be inert, but they are designed to look and act like the real thing, giving the Pentagon all the information it needs to assess the F-35's capabilities as a nuclear strike platform.
Oh my God. So much talk about fucking nuclear weapons. What's going on?
Development of the B-6112 has been ongoing since at least 2011, and the new bomb is technically a refurbishment and consolidation of 4 existing variants. the B-61 3, 4, 7, and 10. The B-6112 is characterized by a new tail assembly that features an inertial navigation system precision guidance package for much enhanced accuracy. 3 of these are tactical nuclear weapons, and 1 is a strategic nuclear, but they share a variable yield design that allows them to explode with a force between 0.3 and 340 kilotons of TNT as desired. In addition, they can carry a variety of fuses and can either drop on a ballistic arc or retard their forward flight by using air drag to drop almost straight down. At about 800...
Portrait, what the hell? Portrait. Why isn't it coming out? Portrait? I don't think there's anything. Oh, I got. Oh, painting. This is Rembrandt's portraits. He always did that scratchy. Look at this. He always did that. This is a nice head study. I like that. That's nice. Let me do that one. Let's do that one. Okay, let's do this one. Let's do this one. This looks like an easy piece to make, and I like it because it looks so let's do this one. Okay? Yeah, let's do this one. Where's the big one? Oh, here we go. Alright, so how are we gonna do this? We're gonna do let's just do it this way with the umber. Right? The umber. To do the umber, we got, let's say the hair, right? Something like that, right? Hair's gonna be there. Something like that. Like that. It's gonna go there. It's gonna be a small face. Like that. Trying to get more familiar with these mediums. Not the medium because it's gouache. I wonder if gouache has what type of mediums. I'm still gonna try to fix this. The only thing about figuring how to make this, because the thing about gouache, it doesn't have no shine. I'm gonna give it a spray and see what that does. And then over here, let me see this. Maybe that'll do something. Right, this thing. Okay. I was talking about Pete yesterday, and I saw him today. Isn't that something? That's bad. So let me, instead of drawing this, I'm gonna figure out the distance. That is gonna go. Alright. Okay. I don't know what happened here. That was this one.
150 pounds and 12 feet. The B-61 is
Oh, yellow, yeah, right. This is over there. This is, I made this a little too dirty. Then this here. This is too much. And I like the gouache because it's a good way of moving paint around. Like I don't want to work in oils. I just want to sit back and I can do that with gouache. I thought I wasn't there.
Here with reaction, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. Lindsey, I know you and I have both been viewed as hawks, but if we don't learn from our mistakes and our successes, then we're doomed to repeat failure. Now, what happened in Afghanistan ended up being an unmitigated failure and a disaster. We can't be engaged in these foreign conflicts in perpetuity. Reagan showed us the way with the Mujahideen and with the freedom-fighting Contras, and I would argue Trump showed us with ISIS, Soleimani, and Baghdadi. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. President Trump said something today that I think was really smart. He said 100 years from now, they're going to look back at this time in history and wondering, what the hell were these people doing? What did you suggest? You suggest that the war criminal, Putin, who is murdering Ukrainian men, women, and children by the thousands now, should go, and that created controversy. I really don't care how he goes. I don't care if they turn him over to The Hague to be a war crimes trial, where he should be. They give him an early buyout, or somebody takes him out otherwise. You're right to want him to go. If you can't say that, what the hell's wrong with you? Why can't you say openly to the Russian people, you need to take care of this problem, Putin, for your own good. Your country will never go anywhere as long as he's your leader. And look what he's doing in Ukraine and throughout the world. So President Trump gave a 20-minute interview today that I wish every American could heard. It was the way to handle this problem. He says you can't let a guy with nuclear weapons dictate the world because he has nuclear weapons. We have a military too. Trump said if he threatened a nuclear exchange on his watch, he'd have submarines all around Russia saying he should not do that. Trump says we should give the minutes and then some. Here's what I would say, that if Putin gets away with this, China will take Taiwan. And you worry about a new world order, President Biden? If we let the Ukrainian people down and Putin wins here, China will take Taiwan and Iran will get a nuclear weapon. But during this debacle called Ukraine, we're negotiating with the Iranians to give them a pathway to a bomb. So I miss President Trump. If you could listen to him today, please have him on your show. He would reassure you it does not have to be this way.
Well, he proved that it didn't have to be this way, and we had him on the show recently, and he said as much. There's a reason that the Taliban didn't kill an American around the last 18 months that he was president, and then they went on the march when Joe Biden was sworn in. That's called peace through strength. In terms of America's role, why would Joe Biden veto Poland giving MiGs to the Ukrainians so they can fight their own war? That seems like a mistake, too.
Because Putin owns Biden. Biden is afraid of escalation. He's afraid of making Putin mad. As the troops were building up around the Ukraine, Republicans and Democrats said put sanctions on Putin for the provocation of a military buildup. Don't wait to the invasion. So here's two questions the world needs to ask and answer. There's going to be a NATO summit. Here's what I would say on your show to NATO. If there's a chemical weapons attack by the Russian military against the Ukrainian people, we should impose a no-fly zone immediately, because that's breaking all the rules that we've established since World War II. If Putin explodes a nuclear weapon inside of Ukraine, the radiation will affect most of Europe. We should consider that attack on NATO itself. So the one thing I've learned with bullies like Putin, if you're not clear, then they will assume you're weak. So nobody assumed Trump was weak. You know why Putin didn't invade Ukraine on Trump's watch? Because he didn't think he'd get away with it. Taiwan is looking at Ukraine as a dress rehearsal. This is the most dangerous time in world history since the 1930s. So I'm begging NATO to let Putin know what would happen if he used chemical weapons on the poor, suffering people of Ukraine. We would have controlled this guy through NATO. If he launches a nuclear weapon, if he explodes a nuclear weapon in Ukraine to scare us all away, we should say the radiation coming to NATO countries is an attack on NATO itself, and you're picking a fight with NATO.
Well, let's see what happens. This is what happens when you have a weak American president that projects nothing but weakness.
Yeah.
Senator Graham of South Carolina, thank you. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Yesterday morning, Joe Biden's Secretary of State, a man called Tony Blinken, went on to the Sunday show over at CBS News to announce a new policy toward Russia. Going forward, Blinken explained, the Biden administration will use Poland as a cutout to send fighter jets to the government of Ukraine. Those jets will be used to fight the Russian military. Blinken announced this in a calm, even tone that suggested this was conventional procedure, business as usual, nothing to worry about. Just another weekend at the State Department. But in fact, it's not typical. It's a very big step. It could turn out to be a pivot point in history. And for that reason, we want to show you the entire exchange. Here it is.
I think this was all
If,
planned.
for instance, the Polish
I don't
government and the
understand
NATO
how
member
is it that
wants to
Putin,
send fighter jets,
Biden's
does
son
that get a green
was
light from the
over
U.S.,
there.
or are you afraid that that will escalate
And now
tension?
all this money going over there.
That gets a green light.
Over
No,
there.
that gets a green light. In fact, we're talking with our Polish friends right now about what we might be able to do to backfill their needs if, in fact, they choose to provide these fighter jets to the Ukrainians. What can we do? How can we help to make sure that they get something to backfill the planes that they're handing over to the Ukrainians?
Are you afraid that will escalate tension, asks the script reader, because even a CBS News anchor knows that sending fighter jets to a war usually does that. No, replies Tony Blinken, that gets a green light. It's a remarkable exchange. What are we watching here? Apart from a conversation between two incredibly shallow people who have limited contact. Apart from a conversation between two incredibly shallow people who have limited contact with reality. What we're watching is the beginning of a war between the United States and Russia. If that sounds jarring, what else would you call it? Now, you may support everything that Tony Blinken just said. Maybe you do support it. But let's not lie about what's happening. Let's be as honest and clear-eyed as we can be, especially now, because
Little
it
by
matters.
little.
The Biden administration just inserted itself
I
with
guess
force into the middle of a hot
that
war between
nose
two foreign
is
powers.
gonna have to come
That
down
means the United
further.
States is now an active participant
in a war.
Let me check
We are
this
at
now.
war with Russia.
You know,
Whether or not that war has been officially declared, whether or not
That
Congress has
knows.
authorized that war, all of that is irrelevant.
right there.
That war is happening right now as we watch.
I know.
Why is
right
no one in
there.
Washington saying anything about this? Because they support it. They always have. Almost 5 years ago, way back in 2017, Congressman Eric Swalwell of California came on this show for another Russiagate debate, one of many. He came to let us know how Vladimir Putin had gotten Donald Trump elected president. It was all as stupid as you remember it, until the end of the interview, when Swalwell said something odd and interesting. Swalwell explained that because Putin had installed Donald Trump secretly in the White House, the United States should now, quote, do everything we can to expand NATO's role. In other words, we should let Ukraine join NATO. That's odd.
It is.
Why would he say that? Why would a policy so seemingly obscure NATO, Ukraine? What? Why would that be a
Why
priority
would
for
he
some
say that?
forgettable congressman from the East Bay? Well, simple. Because getting Ukraine to join NATO was the key to inciting war with Russia. We didn't get it at the time. Now it's obvious. Vladimir Putin just invaded Ukraine because he didn't want Ukraine to join NATO. Putin certainly had other motives as well. People always do have multiple motives. But that's the main reason Russia invaded. The Russians don't want American missiles on their border. They don't want a hostile government next door. Now that's true, whether you're allowed to say it in public right now or not. It has been true for a long time. A lot has been written about this over many years by serious people. No one who knows anything and is honest will tell you Putin invaded Ukraine simply because he is evil. Putin may be evil, he certainly seems to be, but he also has strategic motives in doing that. Whether or not you agree with those motives, that's irrelevant from the facts.
It's true.
So with those facts in mind, the Biden administration's behavior in the days before the Ukraine invasion tells you a lot about what motivated them. With Russian troops massed by the thousands on the Ukrainian border, Joe Biden sent Kamala Harris, the least capable diplomat in Washington, to explain America's policy to European heads of state. At a public press event at the Munich Security Conference, Kamala Harris encouraged Ukraine to become a member of NATO. Quote, I appreciate and admire President Zelensky's desire to join NATO. Message, up yours, Vladimir Putin. Go ahead and invade Ukraine. And of course, Vladimir Putin did that just days later. So the invasion was no surprise to the Biden administration. They knew that would happen. That was the point of the exercise. We watched all this happen. We missed it. How? Honestly, because it was insane and therefore very hard to take seriously. Why in the world would the United States intentionally seek war with Russia? How could we possibly benefit from that war? We still don't know the answer to that question, but it is obvious that permanent Washington has been fixated on war with Russia for a very long time. A couple of years ago, you may remember, we'd forgotten, they impeached a sitting president. Why? For threatening to withhold military aid to President Zelensky of Ukraine. Failing to back a proxy war in Ukraine was the one thing Donald Trump was not allowed to do as president. Again, they impeached him for it. And no one said much about it, even in his own party, because of course they supported war with Russia too. Maybe even more than the Democrats did. As far back as 2016, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, hysterical little Lindsey Graham, was jumping around, acting out his war fantasies in front of foreign soldiers in Ukraine. If we saw this tape at the time, we don't remember seeing it. Back in 2016, Ukraine seemed like a faraway place. We should have paid more attention. Here it is.
Your fight is our fight. 2017 will be the year of offense. All of us will go back to Washington and we will push the case against Russia.
Ми всі повернемося до Вашингтону і ми будемо відстоювати санкції проти Росії.
Enough of a Russian aggression.
Досить вже російської агресії.
It is time for them to pay a heavier price.
Your fight is our fight? That's a very strange thing for an American lawmaker to say to a foreign military. Why would the Ukrainian government's fight in 2016 possibly be our fight? On what grounds is it our fight? What does that even mean? We don't know. And yet now it is demonstrably true. Ukraine's fight is our fight. Ukraine's war is our war. It's here, but most Americans did not see that coming. Yet permanent Washington certainly did. Everyone in Washington understood that the second Vladimir Putin's forces rolled across the border into Ukraine, we would inevitably be on a course toward war with Russia. They knew. Here's the president of the August Council on Foreign Relations on the day of the invasion.
We need now a response of necessity to his war of choice.
And
there's got to be to raise the economic costs at home, to raise the military costs on the
They need to
ground.
get rid of
I hate to be so
people,
blunt, but
too much
the most
people,
vulnerable thing that
the whole
Putin's
thing
vulnerable
with
to
the
is
corona,
dead Russian soldiers.
China.
So we have to make sure Ukraine has the means to resist.
Dead Russian soldiers. At the time, that seemed a little bellicose right out of the gate. It just happened. Maybe there's some way to de-escalate this. The invasion's terrible, but isn't America's role as steward of the West to make things better? Wouldn't a prompt Russian withdrawal from Ukraine be the wisest course for everyone, including and especially the Ukrainians, on whose behalf we claim to speak, but whose country would be leveled by a protracted war? You would think so, but that's not what anyone in Washington wanted. They wanted a war, and now they have one.
Alright,
So
so
where's
we
this going?
gotta
That's the
kind of
question. The
look
rest
at
of us
this.
would know role in making this
Step
decision.
back.
Well, it's worrisome. You should keep in mind that the U.S. government is currently run by the same people who planned the Afghanistan withdrawal, the ones who tanked the U.S. dollar, the people who run Baltimore, the ones who tried to send crack pipes to junkies. These are people with a long history of destroying things and no history at all of building anything. So a lot could go wrong. They tell us that Vladimir Putin is unbalanced. We'll take that at face value. We know that Putin has thousands of nuclear weapons. Putin has said that if he is pushed, he will use nuclear weapons. Could be wise to believe him. Harry Katsianis does believe him. Katsianis is a foreign policy analyst in Washington. Like a lot of people in his business, he regularly participates in government-sponsored war games. These are designed to map out what would happen if various countries fell into conflict with one another. A couple of years ago, not long ago at all, Katsianis participated in a war game predicated on a war with Russia. He wrote about this the other day in the Federalist, quote, "In the course of what we call the NATO-Russia war of 2019, we estimated 1 billion people died. 1 billion. Now, if we aren't careful, what happened in a simulation could happen if a NATO-Russia war erupts over Ukraine. That war has just erupted. The fact that no one in charge seems to worry about where this could go should concern you quite a bit. But nuclear war is not the only risk. The economic consequences of this war are already profound. They're history-changing, actually. And if you don't believe it, check out commodity prices. They're out of control. Wheat is up nearly 60% over last year. That's the highest price ever recorded for wheat. It's not good news if you plan to eat, and it won't get better. Russia is one of the largest fertilizer producers in the world. So, for example, a ton of urea fertilizer that cost American farmers $265 per ton last January now goes for $846 this year. And thanks to sanctions, that number will get much higher. No one who farms has ever seen anything like this. The top of the farmer should be buy groceries will be obvious to you soon. In fact, thanks to Biden's foreign policy, everything you buy is shooting up in price and shockingly fast. Gasoline is now higher than it's ever been in the history of gasoline.
Because like this, gouache, small paintings, I don't have to be doing these huge ones. I can get my studies and small little portraits.
But for the people in charge, it's not high
And
enough.
also, I'm working with the gouache, so I'm trying to get myself familiar. The tricky part is blending.
To stop buying Russian oil. It's tainted.
Building up values is not the problem. The second thing would be the shine.
Likely over $150 a barrel, even higher prices for you.
And how to put make the market
Buckle your seatbelt. We talked to someone in the energy business this morning, energy traders, to get a little perspective on this. He said a total boycott of Russian energy would cause an absolute global disaster. That means recession, depression, uncontrollable inflation, and the rest. Economic devastation to us and our allies. And at that point, in fact, we're already there, we'd be forced to make up the difference by getting more oil from other countries because we need the energy. Batteries aren't going to supply it. So what would those countries be? Well, let's see. They would be pretty clear: Saudi Arabia, Iran, Venezuela. To repeat, in order to wage a moral boycott, we become more dependent on Saudi Arabia, governed by Sharia law, Iran, a rogue state, and Maduro's Venezuela. Because this is a moral statement we're making. This is a moral victory. So feel good about it as you go bankrupt. That's the short-term picture. The long-term picture of war with Russia is even scarier than that. Thanks to Biden's policies, Russia and China now form a bloc against the United States. This was the nightmare scenario. Now it's real. Just today, the Chinese foreign minister described Vladimir Putin as China's, quote, most important strategic partner. So are we going to see a boycott of Chinese goods in the United States? They're making this more possible. Oh, don't bet on it. That would be racist. But we should prepare to lose our position as holder of the world's reserve currency. That is happening in slow motion. It's unmistakable. Now, the Biden people seem to have no idea this is going on, or maybe they want it to happen. Joe Biden was up there at the State of the Union bragging about how he took 30 points off the Russian ruble in a single day. Hooray! Good for us! But once we start celebrating our win, the destruction of the Russian economy, they deserve it. You gotta wonder, is there a downside to this? Could it be a Pyrrhic victory? Let's see. These policies have driven Russia, China, India, Turkey, and other countries to accelerate their flight from the U.S. dollar. Now, to be clear, that's the majority of the global economy. This may be the most reckless and destructive thing any American president has ever done in the United States. If the war in Ukraine ended tomorrow, we would live the consequences of that loss of the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency for the rest of our lives. No one in Washington is even acknowledging this is happening. They're looking for more moral victories to win. And the companies love it. The woke companies, Apple, MasterCard, lots of other American companies are taking victory laps from their role in punishing Russia. Right. Punish Russia. I get that. But you've got to wonder. You've just seen a handful of woke corporations crash a country and impoverish its citizens indiscriminately. Now, that country is Russia, so most of us aren't even thinking about the precedent it sets. We're fine with it. It's Russia, who cares? But is it possible these same techniques might be used someday against some place or somebody that you care about? What if one morning you woke up and they decided that you're Vladimir Putin and you must be erased? Could that happen? Don't think about it. You're probably not able to think about it clearly right now, even if you try. Why? Because there's a moral panic in progress. For the record, this is the third moral panic we have had in the United States of America in less than 2 years. You don't want to live in a country in which moral panics break out regularly, by the way. Moral panics diminish the people engaged in them and hurt the people who don't. They're degrading, they're crazy, they're the opposite of what you want. You want to live in a country where wisdom and restraint, rational behavior, and decency determine the outcomes, not screaming. But we live in a country of moral panics. The first one began in May of 2020 with the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. That changed America completely. The second moral panic was COVID. You've lived through that. So for nearly 2 years, the shouting has not ended. Hysteria is now the official language of public discourse in the United States. That's not good for anyone except those benefiting from it. Who is benefiting? Anyone who lies for a living. The liars have perfect cover. Ask yourself, how much of what you first heard about BLM and then about the coronavirus turned out in the end to be true? How many of the first stories were true? Not many. It was almost all lies. But you didn't know that at the time because you were busy being yelled at. If you dared to point out that actually all lives matter, they denounced you as a racist. If you expressed concern about vaccine mandates, of course, they called you an anti-vaxxer. Sound familiar? The pattern never changes. Hey, maybe war with Russia is not a good idea for the United States. Say that out loud sometime. It's not an extreme position. Most Americans would agree with you. But you will immediately be denounced as a tool of Putin. What is this? It's name-calling as a means of social control. The people in charge have decided their primary job is to decide who you should hate. In an environment like this, everything feels like propaganda, and that's because much of it is. On Thursday, we told you that Russian forces had bombed a nuclear reactor in Ukraine. That seemed to be true. President Zelensky of Ukraine had said it repeatedly, but it was not true. No reactors were hit. An unnamed Ukrainian official claimed that radiation levels in the area had risen. That turned out to be untrue as well. In the words of Mark Nelson, who's a nuclear energy analyst, quote, "I'm afraid to say this looks like a coordinated effort to induce panic." Of course. It was what we call disinformation, and it was designed to get you to support a war against Russia. Now, maybe you support a war against Russia anyway, but you should at least know that you're being lied to and manipulated, which you are. Watch this segment from Good Morning America the other day.
Ukraine's mothers, daughters, teachers, politicians, beauty queens, now on the front lines defending their country under siege. And there is Anastasia Lena, a former Miss Grand Ukraine. Photos of her on Instagram in fatigues, rifle in hand. Underneath, patriotic hashtags.
Miss Ukraine with a rifle, defending her homeland. Is there anything more inspiring than that? It'd be more inspiring if it was real. It wasn't. It was fake. Miss Ukraine was not defending her homeland. That wasn't a rifle. It was an airsoft gun. So the whole thing was not a news story, though you read it as such. It was a propaganda shoot. It was meant to deceive you. It was meant to make you want war with Russia, sympathize with one side over the other. It works. That's why they do it. It's why the tech companies have censored so many news sites recently, including from Russia, but not exclusively from Russia. Now, we're supposed to think this is a victory over Putin or something. But a victory for what? Less information? Fewer perspectives? If getting to the truth was the point of the exercise, we as American citizens would be able to read whatever we wanted to read. That was the rule for centuries in this country. It no longer is, because truth is no longer the point. Instead, Twitter and Facebook are proudly censoring any information that might, quote, undermine trust in the Ukrainian government. Really? Since when are we required to trust the Ukrainian government, or any government? Don't ask. By the way, over the weekend, because everything in America is unintentionally hilarious, now the New York Times attacked Vladimir Putin for censorship. Turns out he engages in censorship, tries to control what his people can read. Lost in the relentless focus on war in Ukraine, by the way, is any perspective about the world or war, which is always lacking in DC, but never more so than now. The fighting in Ukraine is terrible. Of course, you're seeing it happen. No decent person could fail to be moved by the images. But it's not unique. It's not the only war in recent memory, or even currently in progress right now. Many thousands died in the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh war. That was between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Ever heard of it? It ended less than a year and a half ago. No coverage. There's been a gruesome war underway in Ethiopia for a couple of years now. It's again in progress as we speak. Tens of thousands of women have been raped by militiamen, many of them intentionally infected with AIDS. Can it get worse than that? How many people have died in the war in Ethiopia? We don't really know, because no one in our media cares enough to keep track. It's just Ethiopia. We do know that hundreds of thousands of people, mostly civilians, have died in the war in Yemen. It's a war the Biden administration has continued to fund. Doesn't get a lot of attention. It's just Yemen. Who cares? All human life is equal. All of us are equal in the eyes of God. The death of someone in Ukraine is exactly equivalent to the death of someone in Yemen in its importance, period. But hardest of all to ignore, though media have pulled it off and ignored it, is the civil war that's underway 100 yards from El Paso, Texas right now. The Mexican drug war. That's what we call it. It's likely killed more than 100,000 people. In 2019 alone, close to 10,000 Mexican citizens just disappeared, most of them young men. More journalists are murdered in Mexico every year than in any other country in the world. You're seeing pictures on your screen right now of that war. They're horrifying. We're keeping the bad ones off the screen. Trust us. They're awful. But it's not a crisis. It's totally normal, says the Biden administration. Open the southern border. The border we care about is Ukraine's. Now, Republicans in Washington, to their eternal shame, have no problem with any of this. In fact, many of them are more for war with Russia than Joe Biden seems to be. That is a disgrace. It will hurt them in the midterms. It will hurt them on some deeper level, because it does not serve the interests of this country. A war fought on behalf of democracy that ignores the will of the country fighting it. At some point, so we'll explain exactly what's going on here. We're out of time for tonight, but it's enough to know Republicans are not representing their voters when they move to a position that's way more warlike than Joe Biden's, when they embrace the lunacy that could really hurt this country. That aren't representing people like Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell seems like a Republican voter. He's a 27-year-old mixed martial arts fighter. He's a cattle farmer from Cabot, Arkansas. The other day, someone asked him what he thought about Ukraine at a press event. Here's what he said.
I just wanted to get your thoughts on the whole Russia and Ukraine situation.
You know, here's my first thought, is I'm not going nowhere to fight none of these wars for these politicians. I'm staying at home, and when the war comes to Arkansas, I will dig my boots in the ground, and I will die for everything I love, and I will not retreat. If this country's invaded, and everybody's saying, well, we gotta evacuate, we gotta leave, I will not.
That's right.
I will dig my boots in the Arkansas soil, and I will
way.
and I love it. I'm not going overseas to fight. I don't know what's going on, to be honest, brother. I really don't. There's so much stuff, and I don't think nobody knows what's going on fully. There's been so much political corruption in that area. You got Biden and his son making a ton of money off of using our tax dollars to bribe their people. That's treasonous, in my opinion. So you got Hunter Biden and his son using our tax dollars. Hey, if Ukrainian government, if you don't do this, we're taking your tax dollars. He shouldn't be giving our tax dollars to that country anyway. We got veterans out here sleeping on the street, and you're going to give our freaking tax dollars to these Ukrainians? And brother, I don't know what's going on over there, but I'm not going over there fighting.
Tell us how he's a Putin stooge, Lindsey Graham and David Frum and Ann Applebaum, Liz Cheney. Tell us how he's immoral. When the war comes to Arkansas, he said, I will dig my boots into the ground and I will die for everything I love.
Amen.
That's the American position. Fight to the death